Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Untangling the Digital Thread, Make Your Product Data Useful Across the Enterprise. My name is Rachel Holmes. I will be your moderator for today. Before we get started, I do have just a couple of housekeeping items that I'd like to go over. Everybody attending the session today is in listen-only mode, but you can always send us your questions through the questions box in your control panel. We will have time at the end of the webinar today to address some of those. It is my pleasure to introduce our two presenters today. We have Executive Vice President Mike Sellberg and Vice President of Product Matt Hein. Without further ado, I will pass it over to the two of them. And gentlemen, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. This is Mike. Good to see everybody today. Just as a brief background on myself and Matt, we both have lots of years of experience in cloud infrastructure and 3D visualization. Personally, I go all the way back to Engineering Animation Inc., EAI, back in the 90s, where our current founder of Vertex was one of the pioneers in inventing digital mockup space, including Viz Mockup. So I spent several years there. We got bought in kind of a triple merger that ended up being UGS, but then eventually became Siemens PLM. So for about 6 years, I headed up product management for Team Center. So I was in the thick of things in the PLM space in the early 2000s. And then the last kind of gig I had from 2009 on was with Workiva, which was a startup company that Matt also worked at. And some of the early founders of EAI were there. And we did cloud-based financial reporting, but we did develop some pretty unique cloud-based architectures that we'll talk about today, and how we brought that to Vertex in the space of helping you with your digital twin product data, both from a data aggregation standpoint and from a 3D visualization standpoint. So with that, I'll let Matt kind of briefly introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. My name is Matt Hein. I am head of product at Vertex. I oversee product management and product marketing. My background, I have an academic background in mechanical engineering, and spent some internships doing welding and shop floor type work, but also working in machine shops, precision machine shops. That kind of led me to go down this path of really getting interested in CAD data, and a lot of my graduate work was in understanding and visualizing large CAD 3D data sets, connecting those to data sources, and trying to do all of this in the cloud. And that was about 15 years ago. So over the last 15 years, I've spent most of my time in software, working with a few different companies, namely a company called Workiva that Mike and I both worked at, where we were building cloud-based applications for sensitive financial data. And so that kind of led us to what we're doing here at Vertex, really pairing some of our background in mechanical engineering and PLM with cloud. With that, hand it back over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so today we want to talk, the official title of our talk is Untangling the Digital Thread. And so we're certainly going to be talking about digital twin and digital thread and aspects around that. Kind of give you some insight that we've learned through our interactions with customers and partners at Vertex, and some of the trends we're seeing. So this slide this represents, I think, a really nice vision and end state, where you've got multiple what we call systems of record, right? So a PLM system, MES, ERP, CRM. You've got IoT, data management, both at the edge and in the cloud, that you're working with both on the factory floor and product. And you're able to really connect all of those data sources in what we call a system of engagement, or lightweight fashion. And really what we're aiming for there is, connecting people right? Having the right data at the right time, and most importantly, in a lot of cases, with the right user interface. I think all of us could agree, if you look at the kind of system as a record on the bottom of this slide, complexity is certainly one of the challenges they suffer from. And so one of the things that Vertex believes, when we offer a platform to help you with digital twin and democratizing your product data to other groups, we really believe that a connected, connecting to people and having the right UI is going to be a big part of that. So you hear us talk about that kind of system of engagement and that philosophy. And again, the goal by that is to, help you shorten sales cycles, right, through enhanced customer engagement, right? If you have a cloud-based system, if you have a collaborative system of engagement, you can do that, right? Increase your factory yield and work on defect reporting and resolution. Imagine if you could have a fully configured 3D model that was connected to engineering PLM data, but also having configuration data from ERP, operation instructions from MES, and tracking defects that go back into ERP, all on an iPad that could be Velcroed to whatever piece of product or equipment that's going down the line, right? So there's some real things that we could do there with the right cloud-based technology, which we'll talk more about. And of course, when it comes to the field service, driving parts and service revenue and reducing customer downtime, right? Everybody that has field service organizations, dealership organizations, if that's the type of company or distribution and service organization you have, we know you're facing uptime contracts. We know that you're you get increased margins from part sales and those aftermarket service activities. And so we aim a lot of our technology at being able to help you in that situation. And then I think supplier collaboration is something that's been talked about forever inside of PM, including back when I was running Team Center. It's just unfortunately something that hasn't, except in rare occasions, there's just not enterprise PLM that effectively includes suppliers, let alone other groups outside of engineering. And we think this is a place that Vertex can add a nice complement to PLM. So it's not one or the other. It's how we can add a kind of a system engagement layer to PM to help with things like supplier collaboration. And then of course we're trying to do something different around connecting your teams and the digital twins with live data, including IoT. For us, it's not good enough to just have scrolling numbers going by the screen, charts kind of updating. We want to give you 3D context for those IoT sensors, and Matt will show you some examples of that going forward. So, that kind of represents the vision and what we think things ought to be out there. So now I want to kind of take a look back and really assess where we're at. Frankly, because we do have some work, and that's one of the reasons Vertex is a company and why we're here today. We think we can help with this. So, the reality is engineering still struggles with sharing product data downstream, or look at it outside looking in. Other groups really struggle with getting engineering data out of engineering, right? And so there's still siloed departments, and this can be both technically and then of course culturally as well, right? We know that manufacturers look at problems differently than design engineers, service engineers, those kinds of things. Again, the struggles with PLM access, I think the folks like Siemens and Team Center, they've made some great strides in working on some of these aspects of system of engagement, including having more task-based UIs and those kinds of things. But it's just, I think we could all agree, it's just not quite there for all the groups that need it. Again, this idea that systems of record, these are fairly rigid systems, right? You've got a CRM database, you've got an MES database, you've got a PLM database. Those things are, they certainly have integration possibilities, but they're not they're not exactly what you would consider to be loosely coupled in a way that you could connect them through data linking and data mashups easily with the system of engagement. And so we're trying to help those systems of record achieve that kind of connectivity and nimbleness, frankly, from a data standpoint. And then last but not least, as I said before, we'll always come back to the user experience. What can we do to make sure we're connecting to people from all departments, all business users, suppliers, customers, field service technicians with a UI that makes sense for their job, not one that's necessarily the PLM UI itself. And so with that, let's take a quick look at some of the other challenges. And so here's, fundamentally the core problem that we see today is it's very hard to share engineering data from a CAD and PLM standpoint for collaboration, right? People, while they do use visualization solutions, the ability to get that to a supplier or other groups is often hard. You don't have the right access through PLM, or you don't have a workstation that's powerful enough to render the visualizations or let alone load the CAD data. And so you get into this exchange kind of continuum of where you're shipping around CAD data, you're having to reduce it. Matt and I have been involved with a customer that actually has groups of people both in the United States and in India. And Matt, you want to talk a little bit about the complexities they have on data reduction alone for field service?
Yeah, this customer, they're what I would say, multi-CAD and multi-PLM, and their challenges, we've got our engineering data in one PLM, we've got maybe additional service information for work instructions and technical documentation in another system, and the amount of effort that they need to go through to connect those two systems together, and then at the same time also spend a bunch of manual time and labor making sure that the data translation quality is there, that I can reduce this data down to formats that these applications can be used, whether that's on a website or an iPhone somewhere in the field, and they're just spending hours upon hours. I think tens, if not hundreds, of people going through this process just to get something that's poor quality and disconnected from that source of truth.
Yeah, I think and thanks, Matt. I think that's some great context. I think in addition, people, there's this confluence of for people that are making complex products, you have this challenge of essentially massive model visualization combined with being able to look at a full model that's configured, properly connected to PLM and ERP, that's within a service BOM that's in the field. And those folks those technicians are wanting to use this on their phone or a tablet, right? They're in the middle of a work site somewhere. They don't want to be lugging around too much hardware to do visualization. And so people have tried things like using some of the game engines like a Unity, and those are very good for certain situations, but what they require you to do, they're optimized for you reducing the polygon count of your current models using things like texture maps, and then they might be able to visualize that on a phone for you. And people have really struggled with that. And so what Vertex, as Matt will show you, is we've made a zero transformation data pipeline, right? We take the high fidelity CAD data, go right into Vertex in the cloud with that, and we can render, some of the largest models out there on a phone or a tablet or any kind of low power device, so no GPU required. So we've really solved that problem that you see on this slide as well. And so with that, I think I'll let Matt start to talk a little bit about what Vertex has done and give you some demos here. So
one thing I'll add on this slide too is, it's not just engineering getting their data downstream, but all the consumers of that downstream data, manufacturing, service, even the customers, all of those groups are generating their own sets of data. And I think this ties back to, as we talk about the digital thread, I think of it as this giant feedback loop of data and information flowing in here. And, simple things like, being able to, identify parts and add context to parts or digital twins, it's just disconnected. And it's very rare for engineering to be able to quickly and easily access that. And we'll talk about some of the use cases that could help enable. But, the way that we see how Vertex can help untangling this digital thread is really, again, trying to get your product data, which, again, there's some challenges on why that product data is just so hard to communicate in the digital thread. I would say certain data sets, let's say, that are more relational and in nature, think about something like just a defect issue or a service ticket. It's structured information, and that can easily be used in a data architecture where I can, create a mashup of those different data sources and deliver that downstream. However, with engineering data, there's just some fundamentally core differences with that data, and it's, like we're talking about before, there's some sensitivity with intellectual property on that. The end user interface is complex. Not everyone's a CAD designer. You need hardware, you need software to view it. And Vertex really frees the constraints of this. So, now you can take your engineering data, put it in a place that's easily consumable through an API and a user interface, and I can deliver that really to anyone in the world. No real data transformation like we were talking about before, jumping through all those hoops, and connected to that PLM system, and all this information can flow freely from engineering to non-engineering and back. So with that, really we've created this platform for the digital thread that I can view any size model, any number of users, any device, connect that to sources of truth, build interactive digital twin applications for each group in their context. And I think that's one of those important things to talk about. This isn't a digital twin, digital thread application that is just universal. Every group has some different information that they're interested in. And if I'm in field service, how do I get access to telemetry coming from that product? How do I get access to the exact configuration, the serial number of that piece of equipment? How do I identify parts? Those things are very specific to me in the field, versus manufacturing. It might be it's totally different. And same thing with we've got plenty of customers using us for things like sales and engineering design collaboration with the supply chain. What makes the Vertex platform different? One, instead of trying to figure out how to do a file-based approach where I'm passing these files along the digital thread, we've really thought through, if I can get that data into one place, and keep that data and centrally locate it so I have access control. Now I can manage consumption of that data downstream. And so the way that we're building our platform allows you to just stream that data. So I'm not actually sending the data, I'm streaming the data to these different groups and connecting that to different systems of record. We've specifically designed our platform to be easily consumable from both a user interface standpoint as well as an API and SDK. And we've had a lot of success with customers building, digital thread and Industry 4.0 applications, specifically for mobile and low-powered devices. And what I'll do here is quickly talk through a few use cases, and then I'll show a demo. These are some customer problems that we've been encountering both with prospects and our current customers. But the big one is, can I get the digital thread to help me understand and improve my designs? Can I send that design out to get feedback on DFX type feedback? Can I get information about issues with design for manufacturability, service, warranty? When I go to build the next iteration of my design, how easy is it for me to collect all that feedback and look historically how the design was performing? Another interesting problem that we've been solving along with digital thread is logging and viewing defects as the equipment is being built on the shop floor. So typically, these are separate systems between PLM, MES, and let's say the issue management systems. But what we've been able to do with some customers, and I'll show a demo of this in a second, is be able to connect these things together so that I can easily log insights and quickly visualize those issues. The last problem, and I'll show this as well, is being able to connect service to an actual digital twin. So taking the actual IoT data coming off of a piece of equipment, connecting that back to the digital twin in the PLM system, and then that would allow me to have rich interactivity. Otherwise, I'm looking at static images, trying to understand which parts I need to replace. And most often you're working with outdated work instructions and field manuals. So with that, what I'm going to do is give a quick demo here, and everyone can try out these demos. If you go to our developer portal, developer.vertexviz.com, I'm going to click on the examples page here. And what we've done is built some open source example applications with our platform. So the first one I'm going to show here is 3D work instructions. So if you click this launch app button, this will fire up a new window. And what you can see here, we've got a kit car here. I'm going to click begin assembly. And what you're seeing on the screen really is, the actual digital thread connected to the PLM system, connected to the MES. And this allows me to do, rich interactive 3D work instructions, right? Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of a delay. There we go. So I can click step by step through this example application, get the work instructions. And the cool thing about this is, connecting this to the digital thread, let's say this bolt was stripped as I came across it. Now I can click here, report an issue. And when I report that issue on the shop floor, I'm actually getting the real part ID. Not just the part number, but also the part ID associated to where that is located on that 3D model. And so I can go through here and log a specific issue submit the issue, and then that will go back into your issue management system. With that, I'm going to show another example. Let's say you had collected a lot of those issues and you wanted to visualize all of your data across a digital thread in the context of this same car here. So if I click on defects here, so I had logged all those defects. Now I can start actually visualizing this information. And by the way, this is all web-based, so anyone in the company could access a system like this, right? Imagine all the types of data analysis that you're doing with a system like Tableau, where I'm doing queries across different systems, being able to pull all that context together to give me better insights on my model.
So basically, any business intelligence application or data warehouse or data lake that you're currently using, it's fairly easy to wire up to get this kind of 3D context as well, right? So.
Absolutely. And one more application that I'm going to show on our examples page here is the digital twin. So we digital twin's kind of a loaded term, I know, but I would classify this type of digital twin as a data twin. I've got my my product data up here. So again, this is a specific configuration of this wind turbine, but I'm collecting a lot of data, a number of different sensors, right? And so I can start to turn on some of these sensors and then step through different timestamps for those sensor values and really see where there is an issue in the system, and again, tie this back to maybe that issue management system. Now I can actually identify parts on here and communicate back to base about what I'm seeing with this piece of equipment. So the theme of all of this with this webinar is taking that product data and connecting it to different systems of record. This can be IoT, but like I said, it can also be your MES system. We've done a variety of integrations, and it can really help improve that feedback loop. So with that, Rachel, I think we'll go to some questions.
Absolutely. Thanks you both for all of that information. As a reminder, if you do have questions, please send those in through the questions box. And we did have one come in. Why don't data solutions like data warehouses and data lakes solve some of these problems that you've been talking about today?
Yeah, that's a good question. This particular slide, I would say this pattern on the right, you'd be a star-shaped pattern. That's probably pretty common with data warehouses. The data warehouse really requires very structured information, and like I said, most of these data systems rely on, I would say, more text-based information. And one of the key challenges with, I think, applying a data warehouse strategy to the digital thread is not all of these sources of truth, systems of record, as Mike was saying at the beginning, necessarily can truly connect to each other in ways that are machine readable. And I think that's one of the challenges with trying to get these different data systems connected. And I think that's kind of, I think everyone will start with a data warehouse type pattern. And in fact, we work with a lot of customers using data warehouses. But again, you really need that data quality to ensure, that data coming out of engineering, what is the unique identifier that I can connect to downstream? And oftentimes we'll see differences between, let's say, the configuration that's in PLM, the as designed versus the as built versus the as is. There's often just issues just being able to pull up a serial number and see that configuration. So, I think a data warehouse is probably a good architecture to start with, but it's not going to solve all the challenges that will come up. Go ahead, Rachel.
Awesome. We're just about at time, but I think we've got time to squeeze in one more quick question before we close out today. How is Vertex different from a game engine solution?
Yeah, I think Mike kind of talked about this at the beginning. Oftentimes what we see, a lot of customers start with trying to use a game engine to deliver product data downstream. And so, again, like I could be creating an iPhone application or a tablet application, and I'm creating my high fidelity digital twin, digital thread application. Oftentimes with these game engines, you're just going through more steps to try to reduce down to get that high quality CAD data into a game geometry system. Like there's just a mismatch between the level of fidelity and quality that you would expect between those. And again, like once you actually have the CAD data in a place that you can easily interact with it, where you're actually rendering directly from that CAD data, things like metadata and brep and all the interesting richness of that CAD data is just completely lost when you start using a game engine. And then at that point, you've just got a hollow shell of your original data. So, we see a lot of companies start with a game engine and quickly realize that, they're not getting the performance improvements that they want. They're not getting the, connection back to that source of truth.
And there is some security concerns too, right? Because they're all still using WebGL. So you're still bringing triangles down to the actual end user device where, Vertex, we keep all that in the cloud and kind of avoid those security risks. And remember, these are applications that people are using all over the world on a phone, and certainly in areas where they would not want their IP compromised. So.
Yeah, that's right, Mike.
Great. Well, we actually did get one more question in. I know that there are a couple people still on the line, so we appreciate you holding on just a little bit longer, but we did have another question come in that I just wanted to pass over to the two of you before we close out. A question about who are some of the competitors or alternate solutions to something like Vertex?
Well, I think we just touched on one. I would say, coming in to the market, some of the customers that we've been working with will often try to use, let's say, a game engine SDK, or even I think some SDKs provided by their PLM vendors. And from our perspective, I think those work up to a certain point. But if you start to really look at the underlying technology that enables some of those SDKs to work, you're still relying on the end device to do a lot of the heavy lifting. And what we found is some of the more interesting applications of the digital thread and digital twin are actually out in the field, or maybe on the shop floor where you don't really have a high-powered device. And I think a lot of those existing competitors of ours really rely on rendering all the heavy workload and doing all the heavy workload on device. And there's some things where you can do that. Let's say small bombs. Let's say tens of parts. But once you get to hundreds, thousands of parts, things start slowing down. And not only slow down in terms of just performance, but you're also thinking about wait time. So I'm transferring all that data over the wire. And with Vertex, with our ability to keep it one spot in the cloud and stream that information to a device, you really cut down on those performance impacts. And like Mike said, some of the security risk there as well.
Okay, perfect. Yep.
Great. Well, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Mike, for your time today. And thank you to everybody who attended. We really appreciate your support. We will be sending out the recording to this webinar so everybody can review it at a later time. But thank you again for joining us and have a wonderful rest of your day.